I'd like to introduce to you our poets who have come to read to us tomorrow. And I'll start with Tony Hoagland, who is here right in the middle. Hey, Tony. And Kenneth Hart. Let's see, where is Ken? There he is. And last of all, Brian Turner, who is going to read to you this evening. And I think we ought to just get started. So I'm going to call Susan Lilly forward. She's a fabulous poet from Winter Park. If any of you have anything to do with Winter Park, talk to her, because you're probably related to somebody who's related to her. And she's a wonderful poet and educator in Winter Park, and she's a good friend. And she's a good friend of Brian Turner's. I asked her to come introduce him.
Forget your juice.
Never.
Okay. Hi, everybody. What a gorgeous place to hear some beautiful writing. Well, I've known Brian for several years, and was a good friend of him with his wife Elise, who left us last year very sadly, and they're really so special to me, these people, both beautiful writers. A couple of years ago, I had the chance to curate a poetry feature for Borough Press Review, which is an online magazine that usually is devoted to prose. It was in honor of National Poetry Month, which is April. Brian Turner was my first choice of the 4 poets I wanted to share. My other first choice was Ken Hart, sitting right over there. It's possible to have more than one first choice. So I'm going to quote my own introduction a little bit here. But first you need to know that Brian does live in Orlando, although we don't get nearly enough of him because he is always on the road. He's in demand here and there, including his role as director of the MFA program at Sierra Nevada College. And if you don't know what an MFA director does, it's a pretty immense job. So the fact that he can do that and still write amazing things, that's a feat. He has prize-winning poetry collections, which we will hear some poems tomorrow. But this evening, we're going to hear some of Brian's Iraq War memoir, My Life as a Foreign Country, which has garnered beatific reviews, and it's on lots of best of lists. And I think it's part of the pull of this book is that war stories hold a perennial fascination for both people who've been there and for people who can't fathom such an experience. And this book is one of the most intimate, devastating, and enlightened soldier stories you'll ever come across. I hope you all get a chance to read the whole thing. But it's impossible to hear Brian's prose and not know that this guy is a poet. About My Life as a Foreign Country, Mark Doty said that in Brian's hands, quote, language is war's undoing, in the sense that his words won't allow absurdity and terror to be anything less than real. Nick Flynn says, Turner's voice is prophetic, an eerie calm in the midst of calamity, achingly disturbing, shockingly beautiful. So I'm not going to say out loud words that I think like luminous and transformative, because these words have been so overused for lesser work. But I am going to say incantatory power, because I can't help it. A true citizen of the world, this soldier poet takes a wide lens view that can zoom into some delicious or shattering close-up any minute. Brian's generous vision of this world in all its beauty and awfulness is something we can all be grateful for. Writers like Brian give us the magic potion to keep our souls awake. So drink deep. Brian Turner, ladies and gentlemen.
I think I'll start with a quick poem that's not my poem. I actually didn't ask if this was okay, but maybe just to start it off, it's Yehuda Amichai in translation. It's called The Diameter of the Bomb. The diameter of the bomb was 30 centimeters with an effective range of 7 meters, with 4 dead and 11 wounded. And around these, in a larger circle of pain and time, 2 hospitals are scattered and 1 graveyard. But the young woman who was buried in the hospital she came from, at a distance of more than 100 kilometers, enlarges the circle considerably. And a solitary man mourning her death on the distant shores of a country far across the sea includes the entire world in the circle. And I won't even mention the howling of orphans. It rises up to the throne of God and beyond, making a circle with no end and no God. So, Yehuda Amakai. Yeah. Yeah. I mangled the first line, but hopefully you'll indulge me. And I changed one word from the translation, which is howl in the translation. And I won't even mention the howl. To me, howling, there's a more plaintive feel in my body when I say it. Just seems right. I'm going to read some poems. I better put on some glasses so I can actually read some from this memoir. It's probably good that you have a blue shield on the microphone, because there might be a few blue words here and there. I was a sergeant in the infantry for 7 years, 1 month, and 29 days. Originally stationed out of Fort Drum in New York, near the Canadian border. With that unit, 10th Mountain Division, I went to Bosnia from 99 to 2000 for about 6-7 months. I was more, I would use the word tour there. I got to go to a restaurant, sit down and have a meal. I went into a CD shop. I was able to kind of see the country. It was like a tour. There was one guy who fired a shot from out in the wood line into this large base where I was at, which we shared with the French and the Italians. There was about 800 Americans there as well. And I think he had an old hunting rifle or something and fired it from the wood line, arced it in, made it into the camp, but it went through the roof of what we call these sea huts, these living quarters, and went right in between a circle of people who were talking through the floorboard, and they were all Bosnian interpreters. He almost hit one of his countrymen, you know. It seemed emblematic of where we were, you know. But the threat, you know, the danger there felt more like it does here. I live in Orlando now, and, you know, a car accident is pretty, you know, and that was similar there. Car accidents on the roads, that was more what we thought about. I moved to Fort Lewis in Washington State, and I joined the 2nd Infantry Division, and that's where I was more of a line unit infantry soldier. And getting to the point of the blue here, I went to Iraq from 2003 to 2004, and when I came back home, in my family home, we can never curse in my family home, you know. In fact, we were in the small town of Madera, California. We'd driven in from the country, and I didn't know that they had a cannon at the courthouse. I knew there was a courthouse. It was very foggy there in the mornings, and when the crows start to gather and stuff, and you get a lot of them, I didn't know they blast off this cannon to scare them off. I didn't know people do that. You know, I'm 13 years old or something, and we're driving down Main Street right by the courthouse. Ba-boom! This loud explosion goes off. And I thought maybe the Russians were attacking or something, you know what I mean? There was an attack on the courthouse. But I said, what the hell is that? You know, and my mom slammed on the brakes. The car did that lurching forward kind of thing. I'm still looking out the window, hoping that, you know, I knew what I just said, but she didn't care if the Russians are attacking. What did you just say? You know, kind of thing. So when I came home from Iraq, I have very big front teeth, and I have a big lower lip, you know, and I don't know if you've ever really paid attention to the F word, for example, but when it appears, you can see it usually with someone like me, because the teeth, you know, you put them to your lower lip and you say the word, my mom could see it and I had to stop, think of how I might compose a sentence that might say the same material, basically, and then start over. It's the bread and butter of the infantryman's sentence, and all of its permutations. But there's a vast gulf, I would say, between obscenities and things that are truly obscene, and maybe both of those might appear in some of this. We are shelled on close to a daily basis. The unit we are replacing has been stationed at Firebase Eagle as part of the initial invasion and is now preparing to go home. So those we fight have what's called a target-rich environment. In military parlance, the enemy is bracketing our position. Basically, an Iraqi mortar crew is, day by day and round by round, discovering the proper distance, elevation, deflection, and explosive charge necessary to fire rounds directly into our camp. Yesterday was a round exploding 100 meters south of the camp perimeter. Today, 3 or 4 fall roughly 100 meters north of the camp's front gate. If they adjust correctly, there's a good chance mortar rounds will explode inside the wire tomorrow. It's a matter of ballistics, range, velocity, and patience. It's a matter of great patience. The mortar crew has locked onto us and is now beginning to fire for effect. The sound of the detonations, the crack and airy breath of it all, sometimes a distinct explosion, other times the rounds land nearly simultaneously with an overwhelming, godlike finality, the soft architecture of the brain registering each concussion as a type of conversation, the extension of an idea expressed in the physical language of shrapnel, fear. Someone is hunting for your soul. I am afraid much of the time, deep down scared, afraid so long and continually it becomes normal and I don't even realize I'm scared. I'm worried I'll end up in pieces with little flags pinned into the ground beside me. I'm worried I'll be blinded or crippled. I'm worried the same might happen to one of the guys in my squad, to Fiorillo or Jax or Gigantor or Knight or Lou or Noodles or Z or Zoo or Wit or Bruzik, and then it'll be my fault. That I'll make a mistake, one quick and misguided decision that I'll have to live with for the rest of my life, or else lie in my grave and be dismantled by it. I begin to imagine a landscape of ghosts, the way photographers talk about the presence of the dead on the battlefield at Gettysburg, how their shadows fall among the leaves of grass and the stalks of purple thistleweed in the early morning light of Antietam, beyond the sunken road and in the miller's cornfield, Mary's Heights at Fredericksburg, where the Union troops fell in vast waves, the dead at Agincourt and Senlac Hill, the trenches of the Somme, the beachhead at Anzac Cove, ghosts lying under the leafed-out trees along the Chickahominy River, Vicksburg, Cold Harbor. As I gaze out over the morning mist coming off the Tigris, near a spot where Army engineers have spanned the river with a pontoon bridge, the more recent dead from the strafed and bombed Highway 1 cross the bridge and disappear into the eucalyptus grove beyond. Some of them pause in the cross-hatching of branches and leaves to look back, the mist a kind of smoke rising from their shoulders and heads as they consider the months and years stretching behind them. You guys doing all right? All right. Some of you are probably wondering, this guy writes poetry? And now, wait a minute, we're in Iraq and the Tigris and there are ghosts and he's scared all the time. And how does this guy join the infantry, you know? So there are a few, this is a braided book with several different lines of thought that are sort of interwoven. So I'm sort of slipping between those. And one of those threads is trying to answer maybe a question some of you might have, like, why did you join the Army? You know, it's actually the question that started this book to begin with. It doesn't answer the question, so, you know, just to let you know right up front. I pointed to the list and said infantry because I wanted the man in the polyester suit to know at some unconscious level that I didn't give a shit what row ribbons he had pinned to his chest, that I was willing and prepared to crawl through the mud and muck any time of day or night, winter, spring, summer, fall, you name it. I was prepared to low crawl with my face down in the nastiest, foulest, brackish sludge and sewer the world could offer. That I was from Fresno, and people from Fresno can take it in spades and shovelfuls. People from Fresno can take decades of it. That people from Fresno can outcrawl any motherfucker on the planet, or at least crawl with the best of them, low and cold and reptilian. That's why I joined. Which is, that sounds very heroic when I hear it. I'm like, yeah, you're really wearing that Fresno badge, you know. I said infantry because I didn't really know if I could do it, if I could take it, if it would break me down and chew me up and then continue to keep on chewing. I said infantry because I knew that here was a portion of what work is. Here was a portion of what they fed to the lions in the dust and name of Rome. I said infantry because my great-grandfather Carter was gassed during the Battle of Meuse-Argonne in the fall of 1918, the bloodiest battle in American history. He was there in France during the First World War, and yet he still managed to crawl out through the ruined ground, the world wrung into a gear-toothed roar, canisters of gas hissing as they flew over, and he made it back home, though the war would drag him under a few short years later. I said infantry because one of my great-greats enlisted in the Union Army at Cumberland Gap in Tennessee and later served as a corporal in the Tennessee Volunteers. And even though he'd cracked his back on a green horse at Camp Dennison and later contracted rheumatic fever during a bitter December in Knoxville, he stayed on through the fight, from the Confederate horses shot in the river at Shelbyville and on to Huntsville, Alabama, from Bucktown Tavern to Powder Springs to the Siege of Atlanta, and from the Battle of Franklin, the Battle of Nashville, and the pursuit of General John Bell Hood clear to the Tennessee River. I raised my hand and said the words, "I swear," because I would have been ashamed in the years to come if I hadn't, even if it didn't make sense, even if nobody I cared about ever thought about it, even if all of the veterans of my family never said a word, or even if they did, saying, "It's cool, Brian, doesn't mean a thing. Believe me, the uniform doesn't make the man." Or anything along those lines, because it would have meant that between me and the people I revered most, there were beaches and jungle foliage and Russian MiGs and snipers and artillery craters and midnights spent drifting on the Pacific under the Southern Cross. Between me and the people I most revered, there were explosions I couldn't hear, curses and shouting and laughter, engines thrumming, Hueys and Blackhawks lifting from the grass and sand to map the earth in medevac flights that would deliver the wounded to gentle hands in latex gloves, surgeons calling for scalpels and sutures and more blood, type AB negative, while airmen on the flight line hosed bodily fluids from the decks and drank coffee when the day was done. I said, I, Brian David Turner, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend, because of my grandfather's whiskey-tinged silence as he sat through the Indian Wars of 1970s television, movies euphemistically called Westerns, the sound of Bougainville and Guam and Iwo Jima hovering over him as we lit the Christmas candle and put more wood on the fire. I signed the paper because I knew that on some deep and immutable level, I would leave and I would never come back. I wonder sometimes if we do that as a nation. You know? This is a little bit longer passage. Is everybody still doing all right? Yeah? Okay. It's going to get further into like operational kind of stuff. So this reads a little bit more like a standard kind of memoir, but hopefully I can subvert that a bit. But not initially. The briefing for the night's raid is underway. A 5-paragraph operations order. Officers and sergeants view photographs and aerial footage of the target house, some of them taking notes in small green pocketbooks, some of them counting the number of houses on the block, some of them drinking coffee, some of them leaning their heads slowly from side to side to crack and release the pressure between vertebrae. While the briefing revolves around triggermen and bomb makers, call signs and radio frequencies, 9-line medevac requests and medical assets, the soldiers outside prepare a terrain model in the hardpan between hooches. Colored lengths of yarn mark phase lines for the raid. Torn pieces of cardboard from an MRE package, like the meal box that we eat, the torn pieces of cardboard from an MRE package serve as houses, arranged to resemble a suburban street. And the men laugh and joke with one another while they create the model. They don't talk about the people who live in the target house, third cardboard square from the left. They don't talk about the men eating dinner in that house now, the children who run in through the front door, the sound of their laughter as they turn and run upstairs, their mother calling to them from another room. They just place a small cardboard square on the dirt, a small square that cannot hold the beds they know are inside the house, dishes in the cupboards, miniature bottles of Russian-made medicine stored in the refrigerator door, photographs from the 60s and 70s in frames on wooden tables, photographs of weddings and lakeside trips and afternoon visits from family members long since dead stored in the bedroom dresser, nightgowns, bras, panties, sheets folded and neatly stacked. The soldiers stand around the model and wait for their sergeants and officers to tell them who it is inside those small brown squares that they might kill tonight, who it is inside the brown squares that might lead them into their last breath. The soldiers stand over the terrain model and peel plastic wrappers from boxes of Marble 100s and unfiltered Camels, unhinging their Zippos to burn tobacco and take the smoke of it all into their lungs. Soon they'll have to prep the explosive charges, or demo as they're called. And team leaders will conduct their final pre-combat inspections, refilling Camelbacks, oiling the bolts of their weapons. The drivers will fire up their engines and check their gauges. Across town, a small child kisses her father on his cheek. The soldiers inhale the harsh smoke, lean their heads back, and exhale up toward the dead surface of the moon. And though they darken into silhouette as the night draws on, the soldiers brighten inside. They crackle in nerve and flame. The gas stations and laundromats and unemployment lines and hardware stores of America disappear. For now, they are soldiers. They are giants standing over the model of someone else's life, humming with adrenaline. They stand in the great sweep of history, past, passing, and yet to come, and take it all in. The soldiers enter the house. Soldiers enter the house. Soldiers, determined and bored and searing with adrenaline, enter the house with shouting and curses and muzzle flash, det cord, and 5.56 millimeter ball ammunition. The soldiers enter the house with pixelated camouflage, flex cuffs, chem lights, door markings, duct tape. The soldiers enter the house with ghillie suits and Remington sniper rifles, Phoenix beacons and night vision goggles, lasers invisible to the naked eye, rotor blades, Hellfire missiles, bandoliers strapped across their chests. The soldiers enter the house, one fire team after another, and they fight brutal, dirty, nasty, the only way to fight. The soldiers enter the house with the flag of their nation sewn on the sleeves of their uniforms. They enter the house with Toledo and Baton Rouge imprinted on the rubber soles of their desert combat boots. They enter the house and shout, "Honey, I'm home, and here's Johnny!" The soldiers enter the house with conversations of Monday Night Football and the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. They enter the house with cunt and cooch, cockwallet and butcher's bin on their tongues, these obscenities. The soldiers enter the house with paperbacks in their cargo pockets, Starship Troopers and Black Hawk Down, we were soldiers once and young. The soldiers enter the house straight out of Compton with Eminem saying, look, if you had one shot or one opportunity. They enter the house with their left foot. They enter the house the way one enters cemeteries or unclean places. The soldiers enter the house with their insurance policies filled out, signed, beneficiaries named, last will and testament sealed in manila envelopes half a world away. The soldiers enter the house having just ordered a new set of chrome mufflers on eBay for the Mustang stored under blankets in a garage north of San Francisco. They enter the house with only 9 credits earned toward an associate's degree in history from the University of Maryland. They kick in the door and enter the house with the memory of backyard barbecues on their minds. They kick in the door while cradling their little sisters in their arms. They kick in the door and pull in the toboggans and canoes from the hillsides and lakes of Minnesota. They kick in the door and bring in the horses from the barn, hitching them to the kitchen table inside. The soldiers enter the house with Mrs. Ingram from 2nd grade at Villan Elementary School, and with Mrs. Garupa from AP English at Midair High. The soldiers kick in the door and enter the house with their arms filled with all the homework they ever did, and they sit down to consider the quadratic equation, the Socratic method. The soldiers enter the house to sit cross-legged on the floor as the family inside watches how the soldiers interrogate them, saying, how do I say the word for friend in Arabic? How do I say the word love? How do I tell you that Private Miller is dead, that Private Miller has holes in the top of his head? And what is the word for ghosts in Arabic? And how many live here? And are the Ghost Bath Party supporters? Are the ghosts in favor of the coalition forces? Are the ghosts here with us now? Can you tell us where the ghosts are hiding? And where the ghosts keep their weapons cache? And where they sleep at night? And what can you tell us about Alibaba? Is there an Alibaba in the neighborhood? Soldiers enter the house and take off their dusty combat boots and pull out an anthology of poetry from an assault pack, Iraqi Poetry Today, and commence reading poems aloud. The soldiers say, this is war then, all is well. They say the missiles bomb the cities and the airplanes bid the clouds farewell. The soldiers remove their flak vests and turn off their radios, smile and stretch their arms, one of them yawning, another asking for a second cup of chai. The soldiers give chocolates to the frightened little children in the shadows of the house. The soldiers give chocolates to the frightened little children and teach them how to say fuck you and how to flip off the world. The soldiers recite poetry as trays of chai and tea and cigarettes are brought into the room. And the soldiers, there in the candlelight of the front room, with the Iraqi men of military age zip-tied with flex cuffs, kneeling, sandbags over their heads, read verses from Iraqi Poetry Today. The soldiers switch off their night vision goggles and set their padded helmets on the floor while their frightened little children pretend to eat the chocolates they've been given, their mothers shushing them when they begin to cry. And the soldiers, men from Kansas and California, Tacoma and College Station, these soldiers remove the gloves from their hands to show the frightened little children how they mean them no harm, how American the soldiers are, how they might bring in a pitcher of water for the bound and blinded men to drink from soon, perhaps, if there's time. And how they read poetry for them, their own poetry in English, saying, between time and time, between blood and blood, all is well. All is well, the soldiers say. Soldiers kick in the doors and enter the house and zip-tie the men of military age and shush the women and their frightened little children and drink the spoon sugar stirred into the hot chai and remove their stinking boots and take off their flak vests and stack their weapons and turn off their night vision goggles and say to the frightened little children, softly, with their palms held out in the most tender of gestures they can offer, their eyes as brown as the hills that lead to the mountains or as blue as the rivers that lead to the sea, saying, all is well, little ones, all is well. So, thank you. Sean, I really don't know how to do this because I could read as short of the passage. I know there's food waiting, but there's no like levity. There's a little bit, but it's also questionable. But thank you for allowing me to come up here now. I know there are many authors and writers and artists that are sitting around gathered here. So it's an honor to be able to be here, and for you good folks to listen to what I'm been reading. And Sean, thank you for having me. I wish I had a beautiful note to end on, but I know tomorrow with some poetry, we'll find a way.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming here. I'll tell you, I asked Brian if he would come, and he's in demand all over the place, and I asked him if he would come tithe to the Church of Poetry in Vero Beach, and that there was a seaside cottage in the deal, and thanks to Joanne Mitchell, Joanne and Jim. But we really appreciate you coming, and we can't wait to hear you tomorrow too.
Me too. I'm looking forward to Ken and Tony, of course.
Yes, that's right. We're excited about the whole lineup. It's just going to be a terrific time. And so what do you think about the male dilemma?
The male dilemma. Well, I tried to point towards a few issues with what I was reading today,
Yeah.
knowing the theme,
Yeah.
This construction of masculinity in the country, in our lives around the world. Yeah. I think sometimes you said the male dilemma. Just the construction of masculinity is it's something that runs through the course of this book. I'm now hoping to write a book, and I'm starting to write a book that looks more towards the women in my life and in my family, and seeing the inheritance that I have among them, which also is troubled and problematic, and is connected to war too. It isn't as if all the guys just shoot bows and arrows and shoot at stuff, and women are just making like flowers and stuff, and you know what I mean. As a culture, we combine to create these different gender sort of stereotypes and things. But maybe to get closer to the question in real life, for me, that one passage I read talking about the people I most revered and the explosions between them and stuff. My father, for example, had been in a motorcycle accident after he'd been in service, and so he had a scar right here, that little triangular bone, down to his belly button. And I remember, and I write about it in here, but he, all through childhood, and actually all the way up until I wrote this book, in my mind, I can even, if we were in Fresno, I could drive you to the spot. I know where he was hit by this truck when he was on his motorcycle, and he was put in the hospital. But in my mind, his belly had split open, and his intestines, this is not good prior dinner food, but his intestines spilled out on the road, and that I can see it at the angle of his head might have been as a police officer sort of walked toward him in this weird sort of angle, and the heat, because it was in summer, and the heat of the asphalt and the steam from his internal, innards being cooked in a sense on the. But of course that didn't happen, because they cut him open at the hospital, right? Because he had internal injuries and bleeding. He would die if they didn't deal with him. It was a dire emergency, but that scar was from that. But still, my entire construction until my late 30s, or actually into my 40s, was that was the other way around, that he'd split open. And that scar for me was one of the symbols, a visible symbol of what it takes to be a man. Like if you can take it, whatever it might be. So when I gesture towards Fresno, you can take it, you can crawl, that kind of thing. There's a certain pride in it, but I think one of the things that I'm concerned about, I don't have kids, so I don't have to worry about this inheritance passing on, but there's also a kind of pathology in this lineage of war, where every generation of my family, going back to the American Civil War at least, has served in most major wars. And that reverence I had in knowing that I can't be like them unless I go cross into through a veil of fire, go to usually a far off place and come back changed and usually silent afterwards, unless I speak with others of my tribe that have done that. That process and the construction of identity, as much as I love the people I'm talking about, I see it as a pathology, and it's an illness in our culture. And we have to, I would rather my father be painting, and he could talk to me about painting, you know. So I guess that's part of the reason of having these, writing books like this, is not only to search inside myself and learn, but then in sharing, maybe we start thinking about how we construct our identities and what does it mean as a culture. Are we bleeding as a culture? Are we helping each other? I come from a long line of preachers, so you should know this. You put something like this in front of me, but one of the main things that I'm concerned about is that as a country, we're coming up on 30 years, like the 30 years war, just in Iraq. We call sanction years from 1990s, right? But if we were in Iraq, maybe we wouldn't call them sanction years if every now and then jets flew over, some foreign jets near Vero Beach and bombed what they would call installations, but we might call it a building, and they might kill enemy combatants, which we might know their names, or maybe they're relatives of ours. That might be like a low-level conflict or a kind of small war. So America has been at war in Iraq alone since the early 1990s, 1991, and nonstop. And it's to the point where we're waging wars overseas where it's become autonomic. So, I don't have to think, breathe. If I go in the ocean, like I did earlier, I just went up to my knees. So tomorrow I'll jump in and swim, hopefully. But if I go under, I'm going to have to think about breathing, because we do. But normally, I'm not thinking, don't forget to breathe as you're talking, Brian. I'm not thinking about my heartbeat. And that heartbeat, ba-boom, 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 echoes the sound that's happening over the curvature of the earth right now as American ordnance drops in the high hunt for souls to kill people. And regardless of where you stand politically on that, just being connected to it and not letting it be an autonomic system process. You be engaged as warriors, a part of a tribe, of a warrior class, a warrior tribe. We are a tribe that conducts war overseas. What do we do about that? Is there a pathology that maybe we could try to subvert so that more people are painting? So I just leave that question with you. Thank you very much.
Hey, Brian, hang on one sec. You got my notes. So we have dinner, and we have spirits waiting on you, and you're waiting on them. We have to thank Marie. Where is Marie? We're at Marie's house. Marie is our angel. If you guys want to see what an angel looks like, look at Marie. That's what one looks like. She is absolutely our angel in every sense. And I want everybody on our board to stand up, please. On our board, on the Laura Riding Jackson board. Stand up, Charlotte. Dadgummit, stop talking. Stand up. We have the best board. Everybody helps. Everybody does everything. It's almost humbling what all they're willing to do, really, and on behalf of our community. And they're the worker bees, and that's one reason we're having this party, to celebrate them as well. And I also want to recognize our teen writer and adult writer workshop leaders, and I would ask them to stand up. Steve Bradbury and Kenneth Hart. And Steve, stand up longer than that. My God, they didn't even see you. We had very successful sessions, from what I hear. So we have many sponsors. You are all here. I think I'm not going to hold up dinner to go through every one of you. I'm going to do it tomorrow among a larger group But I do want to also recognize the Vero Beach Book Center and our bookseller Chad and Cynthia, and they're gonna make the books available tomorrow to everybody, and I hope you all will investigate these books, because every one of them, I've read most of them, and they're just unbelievably fabulous. So let's have dinner. What do you say? Thank you again to our sponsors who are here, and to our general crowd. Thank you.